Are you looking for a mission-driven school that aims to educate leaders for business and society? Would you like to know how to get into that MBA program, which happens to be at the Yale School of Management? Tune in for this interview with its Assistant Dean for Admissions, Bruce DelMonico.
Welcome to Admission Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Welcome to the 542nd episode of Admission Straight Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Sometimes I'm asked, is the MBA worth it? And my answer is, it depends on your individual circumstances. But I've got good news. We've developed a tool that will help you evaluate whether an MBA is worth it for you and your individual circumstances. And it also estimates by how much. Just go to accepted.com/MBAROI. Again, it's accepted.com/MBAROI and check out how much you're likely to benefit or not from taking an MBA education. And using the tool won't set you back even 1 cent because it's free. It gives me great pleasure to have back on Admission Straight Talk, Bruce DelMonico, Assistant Dean of Admissions at Yale School of Management. He's been on the admissions team at Yale since 2004. He became the director in 2006 and the Assistant Dean in 2012. He was last on Admission Straight Talk almost 2 years ago in November 2021. Bruce, welcome back to Admission Straight Talk.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's great to be here.
And I'm so pleased to have you join me today. Now, let's start with a basic overview of the Yale SOM MBA program for listeners who may not be that familiar with it. And if you could focus on the more distinctive or perhaps the newer elements of the program.
Sure, happy to do that. So just briefly, we're a 2-year full-time in-residence MBA on the Yale campus in New Haven, Connecticut. And there are, some things that you would similar to other programs, some things I think a little bit distinctive, as you say. So when you join us at Yale for your 2 years, the first year is primarily our core curriculum. And then you start to take electives in the spring of the first year, and your entire second year are all electives. And I would say a couple of the distinctive things. First of all, our integrated curriculum in the core, I think is a little bit different than what you might experience in other MBA programs, the way the material is organized. A lot of the same concepts and the material, but organized differently and presented differently. And we think it teaches you to learn and think differently. In addition, I mentioned the electives. You can take those across Yale without limit. And there are other features of the program that I think really heighten the connectivity to the larger Yale community. I think that's one of the nice features of being in an institution like Yale is taking advantage of all the resources that the entire university has to offer. So I think that's another distinctive aspect of our program. And I think a third thing I would point to is our global footprint. A lot of MBA programs have global programming, and I think the way that we've assembled our global network for advanced management and the kind of opportunities that flow from that, I think are rather unique, and I think do give our students a special global perspective in their 2 years with us at Yale.
It was a great summary. Thank you. Now, you mentioned the global network. Yale was a leader in global education for its students, innovating before the pandemic. The Global Network for Advanced Management, which allowed students to take classes around the world from New Haven. Yeah. It also had several study abroad programs. Now that the pandemic seems to be behind us, we're hopeful. What are the global study options at Yale? Can you go into that a little bit more?
Sure, happy to do that. Knock on wood about the pandemic, of course. Yeah, so pre-pandemic, we had this sort of portfolio of global opportunities, and you mentioned the Global Network for Advanced Management. That was probably the centerpiece of it all, but there were others as well. The pandemic obviously, understandably, caused us to sort of pull back on that. There were still some virtual opportunities that existed that continued, but the in-person pieces had to be put on hold, and now those are back. And so it's really, as I mentioned, it's kind of a menu of opportunities that exist. We do have what we call our global studies requirements. So when you come to Yale for your MBA, you do need to complete at least one global studies opportunity that exists. Lots of students will do more than one. And the idea is we want our graduates to have that global perspective, that global mindset. And so, again, many of these opportunities exist through the Global Network for Advanced Management, or GNM as we call it, which is a network of 30 or so top MBA programs from around the world. And we kind of assembled these. It's been about a decade or so at this point, and it's now a self-running, self-sustaining entity. And the idea is that through the global network, there are what I call more modular opportunities to experience learning and business in other countries, other regions, other parts of the world. And so the idea is that in certain points in the fall and the spring, there are these week to 10-day long opportunities to take classes at one of the other global network schools with students from all the other participating global network schools. So it could be up to 30 students from 30 other business schools, peer schools. And the idea is to really, it's not a one-to-one relationship like a lot of other business schools have put into place, but it's a many-to-many relationship. And the idea is it really amplifies the connections you're able to make, the learning that happens, and the ways in which you're really able to expand your mindset. So that's those global network weeks are one of those of the global network opportunities. We also have the virtual opportunities through the global network, which I mentioned, which are similar. They're semester-long courses that you will take virtually with students from the other global network schools. We also have our own international experience trips that we organize that are run. I think some of the schools have this. These are, again, sort of 10-day to 2-week trips run by one of our faculty members to one or more different countries around the globe. It's a group of about 20 or so students. You meet with business leaders, government leaders, heads of nonprofits. Again, the idea is to get a sense of the business, legal, regulatory, cultural context in which business operates in different parts of the world to get a fuller understanding and sensitivity to those differences. And those are very highly rated. Those, again, happen in between during spring break when classes are not in session. We also have some experiential opportunities that are global in nature. So our Global Social Enterprise, or GSE course, Global Social Entrepreneurship in India, and others. And those are courses where you are academic in nature, you're taking classes, but then part of it is consulting to social enterprises in other parts of the world, or social entrepreneurs in India or elsewhere. There are other courses as well. So these are more experiential in nature. And then the final thing I would say is we have our semester-long exchanges with some key exchange partners, and that's if you want a longer, more immersive experience. Those opportunities exist as well. So those are the portfolio, the menu, as it were, of options that exist. And one thing I would point out is when you come to Yale, these are global studies requirements. So you do have to take at least one, but you can take more of these. You actually get a global studies account when you come to Yale that actually helps pay for the cost of these opportunities, because we didn't feel like it made sense to make this requirement and then to not give you the ability to actually undertake them. And so when you pay tuition, you actually get several $1,000s back to be able to pay into an account to help pay for these different possible trips and opportunities.
That's great. Just back onto the network. Okay. So
yeah,
it is possible. I know you have many different schools. I don't remember all of them, but let's say you enroll in a network class. You could be taking students. There could be students from a school in France, a school in Africa, a school in Asia, a school in Canada, or South America, all taking the same class.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So it's not just like if you go to Koç University in Turkey, you're taking courses from faculty for ed coach, but yeah, you could have students from, IGADE, from FTV in Brazil, from Renmin in China, from HEC, from a whole host, of business schools from around the world. And so that's part of I think the unique feature. I think the part of the compelling aspect of this programming.
Yeah. I don't know of any other similar program. So obviously everybody participating. So it's not unique to Yale, but by its nature, but it is a distinctive, if not unique, program. Now, I noticed in preparing for the call that throughout the site, there is an emphasis on the mission, on SOM's mission of educating leaders for business and society. How is that mission manifested in the program and the curriculum?
This is the founding mission of the school, as you said, to educate leaders for business and society. It's a very broad, multi-sector mission. We do have we aspire for our graduates to have impact, not just in the private sector, but the public and nonprofit sectors. I think that's one piece of it. And to really think about, again, not just the benefits that they can accrue to themselves, but kind of the positive impact they can have on their organizations and their communities and the world more generally. And I think the way that manifests itself, in terms of your question, on campus, I think the curriculum is part of it. I did touch on the integrated curriculum earlier, and that is, again, the first year core curriculum. I think it is quite distinctive, and the material, as I said, is organized differently than other schools organize, or the traditional MBA curriculum, the way that would be organized. And again, the idea was to break down functional silos and not teach just according to discipline, but work across functions and across disciplines to have our students think very broadly about the ways that different concepts, different functions of an organization interrelate, even different industries, different sectors. And so the idea, as an example, we have sort of the heart of the first year core curriculum are our organizational perspectives classes, and they're organized by key stakeholder perspectives. So, the sort of customer, the innovator, the employee, the investor, and others. There are about a dozen of them. And as an example, the customer class, for example, in the Yale core curriculum would be most analogous to a marketing class in a traditional MBA curriculum. But in a marketing class, the perspective is very, very narrow. You're looking at learn the 4 Ps. You're learning how to kind of take your product, identify the market space, and get your product in that space. It's an important set of skills, very narrow. The customer class includes the sort of those marketing concepts, but it really thinks more broadly about all aspects of an organization that influence the customer experience. So it's kind of thinking about sort of the 4 Ps, but it's also thinking about operations and accounting and technology and sort of HR and how all those are influence the customer experience, how those are all interrelated, and how you need to think as a leader, how you need to think about them all together. And so there are, all the stakeholder classes are taught like that. And then we have a capstone class called the executive, where you think about all the perspectives together, combined, and thinking about as an executive how you need to have all these different pieces in your head and thinking about them collectively as you're making decisions. So that's I think the curriculum is really trying to teach our students to be very interdisciplinary, kind of broad, curious thinkers and leaders. I think that, and I can talk more about certain aspects of that. So I think that's part of it. Again, mentioning the global piece that we just talked about, very mission aligned. The other thing I would say, again, the connection to Yale, it speaks to the interdisciplinary nature, the broad-mindedness we expect, the kind of a mindset and approach we want our graduates to have. I think that's all aligned with the mission. It's very much a sort of service-oriented approach. And as I said, thinking about the kind of positive impact you can have on the world around you and thinking very broadly about what that kind of impact can be. So I think that kind of underlies the things we're doing both in the classroom and outside of it at Yale.
Okay, great. Now let's turn to the application process and admissions. Yale has an innovative and multifaceted application, and it requires the GMAT, the GRE, or the EA, an essay, a resume, a video, behavioral assessment, and an interview if lucky enough to be invited to interview. Now, the behavioral assessment is fairly new and, again, distinctive on the MBA scene. What's the format for the behavioral assessment? What's the reason for it? Why? And how can one sign up for it?
Yeah. So the behavioral assessment, I want that clarification. So in terms of the standardized tests, the GMAT, GRE, the EA we accept for the executive MBA, not for the full-time.
Okay.
So that's
Thank you.
one small clarification. Behavioral assessment it's an additional component. There's nothing you need to do to sign up for it. When you apply to Yale, after your initial submission, you will get access to the behavioral assessment as a next stage. It's part of the initial submission, but it happens after you click submit. And we've been developing for probably a decade or more this instrument in conjunction with ETS, which is the organization that runs the GRE, and we've had it in place for maybe 5 or more years. The idea is, I think it's often confused for what would be considered like a soft skills test or an emotional intelligence test. It's not really that. It measures a set of intra and interpersonal competencies that we use to actually evaluate your academic preparation for the program.
Academic preparation?
It's not how people think of it.
Right.
So but the idea is it actually, and the motivation behind it is that we have lots of great candidates who apply to Yale, and some who are, based on their grades and test scores, have shown a certain level of academic preparation. Some people who maybe, but based on the grades and scores, maybe haven't shown as much evidence of preparation, but have other aspects of their candidacy that we really are very enthusiastic about and would love to bring into the program. And the behavioral assessment allows us to have additional information about their academic potential that will give us more comfort about their performance in the program above and beyond grades and scores. So it allows us actually to broaden the range of candidates we can bring into the program beyond just looking at things like grades and scores. It's actually helping us broaden the base of our evaluation. increase the inputs. So that's why it's not specifically like an EQ or a soft skills. It's actually something that informs our academic evaluation. And what the assessment actually is, it's interesting. It's a forced choice test, which means you get 130 pairs of statements, in sequence, and you need to choose which pair of statements most describes you. So there might be 2 positive statements, 2 negative statements. Those are tougher to say which one's most likely because they're both negative. But it's, just describing behaviors like I like to have lots of free time, or I like to keep a clean desk, or I'm always on time for meetings, or I'm, all the, different qualities. There are different descriptors, and you choose which one is more like you of the pair. And then you go through 130 of those pairs, and that's adaptive, and it'll create a profile that we then use to help, again, inform our evaluation of your academic preparation for the program. So that's basically how it works.
It sounds almost like it's more of a professionalism assessment.
Well, there are lots of different dimensions that it's assessing, and we look at certain subset of those assessments. It's developed, not to get too far into the background, it was developed actually by the U.S. military for officer development. So it's used in, as you say, it's used in the professional development context most commonly. We've taken it and adapted it with ETS for the sort of the high stakes admissions context, but it was mostly developed and still is used in the development context, the professional development context.
Okay, great. Medical schools have a lot of, or increasingly turning towards what they call it a situational judgment test. So it doesn't sound like it's identical, but it sounds like it's somewhat similar.
I think that's right. Yeah. And medical schools tend to be, as I said, they tend to be a real interesting space for innovation in the admissions process. We talk with med schools and kind of keep an eye on what they're doing a lot, just because it's an interesting sort of intersection.
I actually interviewed for the podcast Dr. Kelly Dorr, who's a co-founder of Acuity Insights, which provides the Casper exam. And that was, I think, one of the first situational judgment tests. It was fascinating talking to her. Yeah. She's just really interesting what they're trying to do. Yeah. Now, getting back to Yale, what changes have you made to the MBA application process this year?
Yeah, we've made a few. Probably the biggest one, the one that's most notable, is we did not completely change, but we expanded our essay question. So for the last 7 or 8 years, we had a single essay question, which was describe your biggest commitment. We've kept that, but we've added 2 other prompts and given candidates the choice to choose which of the 3 prompts they want to write about. So it's still just one essay question, but instead of everyone writing about the commitment, we've also added an essay question about the most meaningful community you've been a part of, and sort of the greatest challenge you face. Those are the other 2 prompts. And so you get to choose which of those 3 you want to write about. So that's probably the biggest change and probably the most visible change. And the motivation behind that was really, we want to hear from candidates about what matters the most to them. And for some, it might be the commitment, but it might be community or challenge. And so we wanted to really sort of expand the options for candidates and give them more choice in what to write about, so that they can write about the thing that truly is the most meaningful to them, instead of having to kind of fit it into the commitment essay and kind of force fit it. You can actually write about something maybe more naturally aligns with one of the other prompts. So that's the big thing. We did also we've done a few other things. We do things every year. Sure. We expanded the background information section that we asked about to get more information about the context in which you're applying. So that's been a thing that's been evolving over a number of years, and we did more work there this year. We continue to get lots of applicants who have some entrepreneurial experience in their background, and so we continue to expand and kind of evolve the questions that speak to entrepreneurial backgrounds in conjunction with Kyle Jensen, who is the executive director of our entrepreneurship center. So those are among the things that we've done, probably the most notable things we've done with this current year application.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. I was going through Yale SOM's application guide, which is excellent. Listeners, those of you who are applying to Yale, that is absolutely mandatory reading. And for non-applicants to Yale, you'll still get a lot of good advice out of it. So I recommend it highly. Now, Bruce, it seems that you have an optional information question and a background information question and supplemental detail area. Background information is required. What's the difference between these 3 elements? How would you like an applicant to use the 3 areas?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The background information isn't completely required, so it is optional. So as is the optional information. So what we did was, and one of the things we did do this year, I guess one of the other big changes is we did update our instructions and really try to. And I don't know, Linda, if you've had a chance to kind of take a walk through the application yet, but you'll notice if you do that we start by, each section of the application, the first thing we say, there's actually a heading that said why we're asking. Because we want candidates to know, why are we asking for this information? I think it's something that, a lot of applications just get straight to do this, do that, do the other thing, but we want to help you understand why we're actually asking for the information. And we did spell out in a little more detail what we're asking for in each of these sections. So they're not necessarily required. But the thing that we did in these, the background information, the optional information, there's also, the supplemental information in the work experience section is we tried to spell out where to include which pieces of information. So, for example, employment gaps and other aspects of your employment that might require sort of additional information. We identified where to put that instead of saying instead of the optional information being a kind of a free-for-all of information, we wanted to divide it, and partly this is for the evaluators to elicit information more consistently from applicants, so that we're getting this similar information in the same way in the same place from all applicants. So to be consistent among applicants, and so that we can be more consistent in our review of your application, so that we're looking at the applicants the same way across applications, knowing where to look, what's there, making sure we're getting it consistently. Makes a big difference, and so that's a lot of why we did update things in this way for the upcoming for the current cycle.
It also makes it if you wanted to say you were to look back on an application and you want to check a particular piece of information, then you would know where to find it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of having it used to be just the optional information, and we would have to kind of dig into that, and sometimes it was there, sometimes it wasn't. Now we know where to look, and we're more clear about what information we're seeking from you as an applicant. So it's easier, hopefully easier for you as an applicant, more straightforward and less of what do I put here? What do I put there? Do I put anything here? So the idea is to, again, make it a little more transparent, a little clearer, more straightforward.
Sounds good. Sounds like a great idea. Any tips for the video component?
Yeah, so I guess that's another somewhat unique. I know there are other schools who do this aspect of the application, like the behavioral assessment. The video is a component that happens after you click submit. So after your initial submission, you get access both to the behavioral assessment and to the video questions. And those are, for those who don't know, there are 3 pre-recorded questions that we've recorded in advance. When you get access to the platform, you can sort of do some test questions, but then you'll be asked these 3 questions. They're drawn from a pool of questions that are randomly assigned to you, and you answer the questions using your webcam, audio, video. They are recorded in real time, though, so they're in the moment responses to the prompts that we have pre-recorded, and then those responses are saved and added to your file, and they're part of your, again, initial submission. So we don't start reviewing until after the behavioral assessment and the video questions have been completed. Then we will start our review of your application. In terms of tips for that, I feel like when we first rolled these out, how many ever years ago, I think people were less sure what to expect, and I think now they do. Some other schools are doing it. It's a little more common. I think certainly post-pandemic, I think being on Zoom and being engaging by video is not a big deal anymore.
Right.
So I think they might seem a little more second nature, but the idea here is we're just trying to get a little bit of a better sense of you beyond your just written submission from the application. The questions themselves are not meant to be trick questions or stump you. It's just to get a little bit more of a sense of you, your goals, your interest in the MBA. Well, we change the questions, every year or so. So they might be something behavioral in nature. The key way to prepare is, if you want to prepare, which you don't need to do much of, but just go back through your resume and think of some successes and failures the same way you would prepare for an interview. The questions are not necessarily going to be all interview oriented, but it's pretty straightforward. I guess the last thing it takes, like the behavioral assessment, which takes about 20-25 minutes. That's how long the video questions take to complete, so they don't take a lot of time. We're not expecting perfection. We know you're doing these live in the moment. So they're extemporaneous responses. They're not, you're not recording a video essay. And so we know that they're not going to be perfect. We're just looking to get a little bit of a better sense of you. And we use it with a light touch, as we say. I think in the application guide, we might even use those words. It's not going to be a main driver, a heavy driver in the outcome. It's just to get a little bit of a better sense of you.
What can applicants expect if they're lucky enough to be invited to interview?
Yeah. So as you said, so interviews by invitation. So everybody completes the video questions. Everyone completes the behavioral assessment, and then we begin our review. And we will invite, depending on the year, maybe about a third or so of applicants to interview. And interviews are either come to campus, you're invited to come to campus, or you can do a virtual interview. They're largely with trained second years or very recent alumni who were themselves interviewers as students. Sometimes those of us who are on the admissions team will do the interviews, but we do fewer than the students and the recent alums. The interview itself, again, much like the video questions, they're not stress interviews. They're not meant to trick you or stump you or kind of be an unpleasant experience. The idea is really to get more of a sense of typically your reasons for wanting to get an MBA, the reasons for Yale, thinking about your post-MBA aspirations, a little bit about your experiences to date, things that your successes that you've had, maybe some ways in which you engage with others. So it's a typical, I think, behavioral interview format that you'll probably see at other schools in kind of a job context. So again, the way to prepare, and it's a 30-minute interview, I should say. So it's pretty brisk, but it will hopefully cover a good bit of ground in that, and obviously save room for you to ask questions yourself. But the way to prepare, again, is to go through your application, go through your essay, go through your resume, have examples, again, of things, accomplishments that you're proud of, ways which are engaged on projects. Those are the kinds of things in the behavioral context that we're asking about. So again, it's meant to be not sort of difficult, but really more of a conversation is the hope, in a way to get to know us and our community. At the same time, we're getting to know you. So it's a little bit about the interview process.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, when you talk about behavioral interviews, it'd be a lot of questions like, tell us about a time when you did X, Y, and Z, right?
Exactly. Yes, I guess I did. I said behavioral interview, but I didn't say what that is.
I think most people know what it is, but just in case, yeah. I thought I'd clarify. I agree with you. I think most people know what it is.
Yeah, but not everybody. And that's why I think to prepare, you can think about examples of times when you did that. So it's less how would you do this, or less theoretical, and more like how did you handle it? Tell us about a time when you did X, Y, or Z. Exactly.
Right. Okay. Now, when we last spoke, it was almost 2 years ago. It was the middle of the COVID pandemic. And that was the environment in which you and I talked at that time. Today's environment has its own noteworthy developments, specifically AI and ChatGPT. Are you concerned about their impact on the essays? How would you advise applicants to use or not use ChatGPT and AI?
Yeah, it's kind of like the, I don't know, it's
not the elephant in the room. It's already out of the room.
Yeah. No, I was going to say $64,000 question, but I think that's dating myself. The fact that that's the dollar amount that I would reference. Still an open question. I know we are talking in various contexts to sort of other schools and how they're approaching it, and sort of seeing what's in the popular press and elsewhere. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves. My personal take, we want to hear from you. So the main thing is hearing from you in your voice about in the essay specifically, what matters to you, whether it's the commitment, the community, or the challenge. I don't know. I guess the two things I say, this isn't a writing contest. This isn't a literature program. We want to make sure you can communicate in writing, but we're not going to be, marking you up if you're a Hemingway as opposed to I don't know what. So
write an MBA essay in Hemingway style or Shakespeare style, or
exactly. I mean, you could actually do that, I guess, with the ChatGPT. But we're, that's not going to earn extra points. So if the point is to have something, right for you, I don't think that already exists. You could already have, I guess, programs to do that. But if the idea is to tell you what to write about, I don't know there's any benefit from having a computer program tell you what matters to you. And certainly they're not going to know what matters to you. So I don't know. I guess I question the utility in this context, even though I'm sure people will I think we do say that I guess the straightforward answer is we do tell people that the essay should be entirely their own work. So that would suggest don't use ChatGPT or any other kind of AI-enabled functionality. But also, even aside from that, I don't know the utility of that. It's we want to hear from you. We care about what you have to say. We don't, again, what some large language model has to say about you, I don't know how relevant that is. So I guess our instructions say don't do it. But even if you were to do something with ChatGPT, I don't know what you would get out of it. But we'll see. I could be wrong.
Be an interesting cycle. Well, and I've said this before on the podcast, so listeners, forgive me if I'm repeating myself. I tried it out at one point and got absolute drivel. It was utterly worthless. And it was not a reflection of anything other than what they thought people should write. It didn't reflect anything of me. And then the other thing was one of the consultants who happens to have a master's in journalism decided to use it to see if she could write a MBA essay with it. Now, obviously, she's a gifted writer and she knows what a good MBA essay is. And she said it took her longer to use ChatGPT to get it to a point where she'd given it enough information that it could produce an essay that it would have taken her to just write the essay herself. So
yeah, I could believe that. I mean, obviously, these are the programs are evolving quickly. I don't know if we're on GPT-4 and then if 5 is coming in. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are other programs being developed elsewhere, but at the same time, yeah, I think that advice and that experience holds. We put it. Some of my team have put our essay prompt into it and to see what they'll come up with, and it requires a lot more work just to get it where you want it to be. So
yeah, might be a very good grammar checker. I don't know, but you already have that in Word. So, anyways,
right, exactly.
What advice would you give reapplicants to Yale SOM?
Yeah, I think the main thing we do have I'm trying to remember the percentage. I think it might be I hate to look to the right number. I think it might be about 10% of our applicable are reapplicants. So it's not an uncommon thing. The first thing I would say is there's no stigma or bias to reapplying. We look at reapplicants the same we look at first-time applicants. If anything, you might have a little bit of a leg up because you've gone through the process once, you know what to expect, and maybe you've had a chance to refine your application from one year to the next. I guess what I would say in terms of how to approach it is think, we're not inherently going to be looking back at your previous application, but we will have it available. So think about your subsequent application as a bit of a conversation with your previous application in the sense that you want to build from it. You don't want to be what you submit to be exactly the same as the previous one, but you also don't want it to be so different that it looks like a completely different applicant. So don't feel as though, it's not as though you should, in your previous application, you want to be an investment banker and now you want to, be a social entrepreneur. Like going from one extreme to the other, that's not that those are extremes necessarily, but going from one thing to another is not necessarily what will serve you well. So think about, what your previous application maybe built from that and kind of think about how you might be able to kind of refine in maybe more subtle ways or more limited ways from what you had previously submitted.
Now, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. You've been in admissions now for almost 20 years, right? Not quite, but almost. What are some common mistakes that you see? You kind of wish, oh, gee, are they doing that again? Can't they not do that?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some stuff. I guess that's true. Over in my years,
I'm sure you have.
I've seen some things, and there are definitely some. Maybe after this over, we can compare notes. But I guess there are mistakes that exist on different levels. There's the much more sort of fine grained, the proofreading, the attention to detail. You'll hear often like make sure if you're you've got the right school that you're referencing in your essay and elsewhere. Those are the more straightforward things. In terms of other mistakes, I think there are a few that are more common. And one to say maybe gets back to the ChatGPT. I don't know. I do feel as though we see less of this, but over my time, I still see in admissions, I still see it happening that applicants will present the version of themselves that they think we care about or that we want to see. They'll say, well, this school is really known for this thing, so that's what I'm going to be to this school. And this other school is known for this other thing, so I'm going to be that thing to that school. This third school is a completely different altogether. So I've got this third version of myself that I'm going to present. And I have to say, again, I feel like just in, not that based on any kind of strict analysis, but just kind of intuitively, I feel as though that kind of shading has happened less now than it used to, but it still happens. And I don't know that it serves applicants well. I think the idea behind it is to try and make your application more compelling and to stand out more. And the first thing I would say is, if there's a certain number of candidates who are trying to do that, you're all just sounding like yourself, like each other. And so that's not the way to stand out from a game theory perspective. And the other thing is, I do believe, and this is, I have a sort of a literature background and somewhat of a writing background. I do believe that when you write most compellingly about things that mean something to you, that you care about. Yeah. And I think that applies kind of to the application more generally. If you're presenting the version of yourself that is most is really you and that you most care about, that's what's going to come through, regardless of what you say you want to do after you graduate, or what your academic background looks like. If you're really being yourself and presenting what matters to you, that's the thing that will stand out. So to the extent people deviate from that, I think that's a big mistake. And then one other mistake, I don't want to go on too long, but frankly, one of the mistakes that people make, I think, is not in the application, but in not applying. I think people will still sometimes undermatch. And this happens at undergraduate. I think it happens in the MBA as well. I think there's a sense that, gosh, I need to be, looking at the class profile, or just thinking, independent of that, I need to be perfect score, perfect grades, perfect work experience. Otherwise, I'm not going to be competitive. And, everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And I think people, there's no harm if you have a school that you're interested in, but you're looking at the class profile, like, oh gosh, I'm not above it on every front. Well, nobody is. So that's one thing. But I think there's a little bit of self-selection out more than there should be at this stage. So that's not about a mistake in the application process, but that's a mistake in not applying.
Why reject yourself?
Exactly.
Let you do that.
Exactly. That's what I'm here for.
Right. Or give yourself a chance of acceptance, obviously. But that was a great response. In terms of enthusiasm, yeah, I completely agree with you. It's so much easier to be enthusiastic about something that you feel enthusiastic about.
Right.
And it does show in all kinds of ways when one is kind of going through the motions, especially if you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, I think, just not to belabor, I think I might have mentioned this to you before. I might have shared this, but one of my favorite admissions, I have an admissions cartoon that's framed in it from the New Yorker. And it's a father and son outside of a door that says admissions. And the line is the father talking to the son saying, "Now remember, be the yourself we talked about."
I think you did tell me that's but it's a very good one. One of my first clients ever, was a lovely young woman. She was actually applying to law school. And it was a time before everything was virtual. She actually came to my office and I met her and we were talking, and she says, "I want to talk about my trip to this particular location." I'm not going to say which one. And I said, "Oh, that's very nice. When did you go there?" She says, "I've never been there." I said, "Well, then how do you want to write about your trip?" She says, "Well, I have nothing interesting to write about." And I said, "Well, how are you going to write about it? I know many people who've gone there." And she was going on, and she saw me looking at her with utter shock and skepticism. And I said, "Do you have a creative writing background?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, neither do I. Why don't we talk about what you've done instead of what you haven't done?" And she ended up writing a beautiful essay. This was shortly after, not right after, the 1994 earthquake in LA. And she was in a part of the city that was badly hit by it. And she tied it into different experiences, I think, and I think it's still on the site, frankly. It was just an excellent, excellent essay in the end. And she got in where she wanted and, was very happy. But I'll never forget that. I mean, it must be almost 27 years ago that this happened. But I'm like, "Do you have a creative writing background? Well, then let's talk about what you've done." And she did. And it ended up being an outstanding essay. And I think, again, because it was genuine, because it was from the heart, because she really felt it. Again, we had a good structure for it. That's where I think I was helpful to her, but she did a great job, and she didn't have to make anything up. Yeah,
no, that's a great example. And it still sticks with you 27 years later. So
yes, it does.
It's sign of how important that is.
Right. What advice do you have for applicants planning ahead for a possible application this fall?
I think one thing I would say is just sort of talk to people, learn about the schools, I guess stepping back, think about what matters to you, think about what you care about, what you're hoping to get out of an MBA. And then based on that, think about where you might be able to do that. And there are probably a lot of places, but think about the things that matter and the places where that, those you could develop those things, or, whatever dimensions those are. And then talk to people, you can talk to admissions officers, you can talk to students. A lot of us, our schools will give you access to our students on like the website. We have student ambassadors, other schools do as well. Where you're working, you might know some MBA alums, talk to them, get a sense of their experience, what mattered to them, what they got out of it that can help you refine your thinking. I think all these conversations can be helpful as you're doing your research and thinking about why the MBA, what you're hoping to accomplish, and how it will help you in your long-term sort of professional path. So that's some of what I would say. And obviously we can, the application itself is a whole other story. But I think as you're thinking, as you're planning, I think those are hopefully helpful exercises and helpful conversations.
I think it's great advice. Thank you. What would you have liked me to ask you?
Oh gosh, we covered so much. I feel like you always do such a wonderful, thorough job of sort of getting at lots of different things in the interviews. I don't know. I think one thing maybe that we didn't get to is what's happening now, Yale, or what's coming down the road.
Okay.
And I don't. That's always a tough question because I don't always know everything that's coming down the road. But one thing
what do you know about?
What I know about. We are looking to and starting to, and this has been something we've been working on for a while, is engage more with our engineering department here at Yale. I talked about sort of the ways in which we're connected to the other parts of the university. And we didn't talk about things like joint degree programs, which we have with the law school and the medical school and public health and international affairs and drama and architecture and the environment school and all the different wonderful programs here at Yale. But one area that we haven't had as much engagement with is engineering, and that's happening. We're going to be starting a program starting within Yale itself, but I'm hoping that we'll expand beyond just the limits of Yale to be able to help our students and our graduates who are really thinking about sort of careers in technology.
A joint MS MBA?
I don't know. That's not what it is yet. But I'm hoping that might be where it leads to. It's now just a 1-year master's. Starting internally at Yale. I don't actually know it's been announced yet, so I probably shouldn't have even said anything, but it will be coming. So, so just more broadly, maybe independent of the program or anything like that, specific programmatic offerings, more just the relationship with engineering is something that we're looking to expand more broadly.
And that you think will come out this application cycle, or more for next application cycle, or do you know?
I think I've already said too much. So
okay, all right. I won't ask anymore.
No, maybe I think this cycle is when it will start. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay, great. Anything else?
And then we'll take it from there.
Okay.
I think those are the main things. I did though. I hadn't thought about that. Talking about the joint degrees, talking about it's consistent with the integration with the university and the ability to take classes elsewhere at Yale. But it's one specific aspect of it that I think is really can be meaningful to people in their studies, and especially if they're looking to go in a direction that is kind of sort of interstitial of sorts, that kind of crosses over different disciplines. So that is one thing that was maybe good to touch on in the context of that answer.
Well, I'm really glad you raised it. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Where can listeners and potential applicants learn more about Yale SOM's MBA program?
I think our website, which is som.yale.edu, is probably the easiest way, and that's got lots of information both generally about the school, but also there's a section for admissions and for other parts of the organization. So that would be the best place.
Okay, great. We'll include links in the show notes at accepted.com/542 to the sites that Bruce just mentioned, as well as to the related articles and show notes and the application guide that I was touting before. It's really excellent. Listener, thank you too for joining Bruce DelMonico and me for our 542nd episode. If you find the show worthwhile, I have a suggestion for you. Tell your MBA applicant friends. They'll thank you, and so do I. Quick reminder, check out Accepted's free MBA ROI calculator at accepted.com/MBA ROI. Thanks again for coming. This is Admission Straight Talk produced by Accepted, and I am your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.